Yes, this is the Nukeproof Megawatt. Now, there's actually not that many long travel e-mountain bikes around, certainly not 170 front and rear. Of course, we've already heard quite a lot about this bike since its launch in June 2021. Things such as the suspension being good and it's been a fun bike to ride. But there's a lot more detail to this bike than meets the eye. You could argue a bike such as this, long, low and slack, is made with only one thing in mind, and that's caning the living daylights downhill. Some people say it's a bike to replace the uplift, but it's actually a lot more. It liberates you of the constraints of a bike park, a bike where you can search out wilder, less populated trails, climb with fresh air and the gentle buzz of the motor, rather than the buzz of a smelly van and the whine of, well, let's not go there. This then is the 170mm ground-munching Megawatt. The thing is, I was a little bit stuck when it came to the sizing. At 1m83, I could have chosen either a large or an extra large, so definitely riding two bike sizes was on my radar. But more than this, I wanted to experience Nukeproof's very unique seat tube offset philosophy. And so Nukeproof have sent us not one, but two of their top-end bikes to have a look at the detail and also the sizing. And let's face it, if you're in between sizing, that's an issue which is relevant to many of us. So what makes this e-mountain bike different from all the other e-mountain bikes on the market? Well, one of the key things I think is Nukeproof's seat tube offset philosophy, which basically means that the seat tube angle steepens with increasing size. So Nukeproof have done this to optimize the comfort and the efficiency when you're climbing. Basically, it's a reach number for your bum. But what I'm keen to find out is how this affects the climbing. So let's go and do a few challenges back to back on the XL and the L. I'm now at the base of a little technical climb, and I want to give you guys some insight into what I'm thinking in my decision making when it comes to which bike I prefer on this climb. Now, when it comes to hill climbing, there's a lot involved. It's down to the type of hill, what mode you ride in, and also the shape of the ground. Obviously, a smaller bike will fit in between the steps easier than a longer bike, but at the same time, a longer wheelbase bike will be a little bit more stable. There's a bit more room up front to keep that front wheel on the ground. So, smaller bike, technical climb. So I'm gonna give you guys a bit of feedback. So yeah, it feels like I'm instantly having to move the seat up a bit more. Feels tighter. Oh, wow, that's interesting. It feels to me that it just fits in between the gaps better. So, I don't know, I'm gonna go and ride on the XL bike and see how that feels. And you know what, that is actually the best way to choose your bike, is doing back-to-back rides. So, just pop on the XL. Now remember that the suspension setup, everything is the same on both these bikes. Now, the seat position on the XL is already a little bit higher than the L, even before you use the seat dropper. I'm in second gear on both bikes, and what's interesting is that when you're on a technical climb, you will tend to be sat down on the lower seat position rather than the higher. So, oh, do you know what? I think it comes down to technique more than bike size. In that instance, I had to press the pedal in a different place than I did on the larger bike. So there's a lot in this decision. Wow, that was interesting. So after the short tech climb, I went and did a longer tech climb. And you know what? I think the longer XL bike was a little bit more comfortable, marginally. I think the reason for that was the longer wheelbase, and also the fact it was maybe a little less twitchy. So even though you could muscle your way up the tech climb on the L very easily and very comfortably, I think you need to factor in what kind of riding you're going to be doing. So if, for instance, you're on some big mega days with a lot of passes or in the Alps or super tech climbs, I'm sort of erring more towards the XL bike at the minute than the L bike. But I think the L bike was super fun to get up that tech climb. Wow, interesting climbing differences there, but I'm not going to be rushing into making a decision just yet. Let's look at the shape and purpose of this bike then. Well, Nukeproof say that it's maintained the descending characteristics of the Mega, which led to 4 EWS titles. So same geometry as the Mega, but different wheel size. Now, the Mega comes with an option of either 29, 27.5, 27.5. This bike is 29 up front for speed and rollover, and 27.5 on the back for maneuverability. Hey, but hey, let's not get too hung up with wheel size because I think it's very much of the moment. However, overall, the Megawatt does share some of the suspension and geometry characteristics of the Mega, but they have tinkered with the anti-squat on this bike. Okay folks, now in terms of the builds, we've got 3 different builds, 5 different sizes and 2 battery capacities. We've got the factory, the elite and the comp. Now, without having ridden each of those builds side by side, you cannot really make any sweeping statements that the behavior of the bikes will be the same through each spec. However, what you need to bear in mind is that on all the bikes, 1051 gearing, 203 rotors, 4 pop brakes and the same tyres. So you're gonna have to ask yourself, what is the performance gain between, say, the comp and the factory? I think it's pretty much down to the fact that you've got SRAM on some bikes and you've got Fox on the others. But also, the comp bike weighs in at 23.4 kilos with the 500 watt-hour battery, but the factory weighs in at 23.9 kilos with the 630 watt-hour battery. So there's an added thing to think about there as well. I have to say that the heavier casing double down tyres, the Max 6 Assegai up front and the high roller on the back does save you on punctures on what is ultimately a gravity based bike. But I'm thinking some of the questions you guys might need to ask yourselves is, will the Kashima fork make you faster? So you're looking at a bike which, the top end bike which is 7 grand, you're looking at the comp bike which is around 5 grand, well, £1 short of. But also you need to factor in that the comp version has that lighter battery, but might have less range. Lots to think about. It's also easy to think that weight will be the determining factor on how a bike handles, which is not actually true. It comes down to such things as suspension tune and the kinematics, because ultimately you can get lively heavy bikes and sluggish light bikes. This particular bike has 170mm of supple off the top and then progressive damping to keep you balanced and in check. But the basic facts of suspension design combined with shock tune, which by the way you could apply to any bike, means yes, this bike is on the livelier side. There is actually quite a wide sag window on the Megawatt of between 30 and 35%. And I know many people will be happy with that because a lot of people are a bit blasé when it comes to suspension setup. But let's face it, that sag height will affect the bottom bracket height of your bike quite significantly. Wow, look at those roots. Aren't they beautiful and horrible at the same time? Pretty much the essence of downhill and certainly the type of environment that this bike was made for. But the question is, what size? Extra large or large? Well, only when we find out that's by going down. But what I will say, it's not just about the short sections. Anybody could match a World Cup rider, maybe over 20 meters. The key part is how your body feels after a 3-minute run. And in the past, I found that longer bikes in general are a bit more comfortable and there's less fatigue on a longer bike than there is on a short bike. There's only one way to find out, and that's going to hit this downhill run. I have actually got to feel pretty comfortable pretty quickly on the size large bike. I'm going to say a series of corners here, right, left. Some people will say that shorter wheelbase bikes are better in tight corners. That's a total myth. Corners are all about your technique, pretty much. Ooh. Braking bumps. Pace is reasonable. Here it comes. Key part, roots. Again, it's about your body position. Now, there is a reason that you might find less fatigue on a longer bike, and that's because, let me check the corners. So, hey, sorry to interrupt, but the corners there were equally as quick on the longer bike. Anyhow, what I was saying was, the reason that the longer bike might have less fatigue is that when you're compressing into the corners, there's actually more weight transfer on a smaller bike than there is on a longer bike. Oh, roots. Okay, details. I'm going to say, nice bit of Western hemlock here. I want to say hi to the designers of the Megawatt in Belfast, particularly like your shade of green and like your work overall. Cannot wait to see Sam Hill shredding the Megawatt downhill sometime in the future. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. Details, I'll wait for this guy to come past. And I think I'll start with the one-piece cast mounting for the EP8 motor down the bottom there. Loving the generous protection on the chainstay, as you do have on the seat stay too. Up front, Acros internal cable routing on the head tube, very nice touch. Gear mounts under the top tube there, and you've got room for not just a 500 milliliter water bottle, but you can get an extender and fit on a 620 milliliter water bottle on the bottom there. Yeah, finally, I think a couple of things. Lovely bit of rubber protection on the down tube, and plenty of space for the tires on the back there. I reckon you can fit 3-inch tires in the back. And one final thing, that is the availability of spares for this bike, which you can get very simply on the Nukeproof website. Nice touch. Power time, and this is another place where the Megawatt is slightly different from many other eMTBs. The battery is easily accessed by way of a cover on the down tube here. Remember, you've got two different battery capacities. You've got the 630 watt hour in the factory and the Elite, and the 500 watt hour in the comp. But you can actually run either size battery in this bike by way of a flip chip. So, for example, if you want to go and ride the bike park and have a lighter bike, you can run, say, two 500s, or if you want to go for a mega day out, you can run two 630 watt hour batteries in this bike. Easy to do that. To give you some idea of the weight differences, you're looking at about an 800 gram difference between the 630 and the 504. The torque on the Megawatt has been configured with Nukeproof's own setup. So you've got two profiles, power versus range. Now in range, you have torque reduced in all modes from Eco, 27 Newton meters, Trail 63, and Boost 78 Newton meters. Bearing in mind, you can actually have 85 Newton meters from this motor. Now that really is worth bearing in mind if you take a Megawatt for a test ride, because that drop in torque in range mode is actually quite noticeable. But remember, you can still configure that yourself with the Shimano eTube project app and put it back to the factory settings. Smooth berms, definitely no place for the gravity-based 170mm Megawatt. Now, returning to the sizing and geometry, what's interesting is if you're sat on this bike in the shop with the seat down, on the size large, if you're 6 foot and on the in between sizes like I am myself, you might feel it's a little bit cramped on the size large. However, if you go to the XL, you might find you've got a little bit more space there. There's about an inch difference between the two bikes in terms of the top tube. But remember, this bike is a gravity-based bike. So such things as the shorter chainstay, the longer front center, which is applicable to both bikes, gives you stability on those corners, and you've got maneuverability because of that shorter chainstay. Nevertheless, it brings me back to what we began with, is that myself at 1.83 m, I'm in between size L and size XL. So we've done the climbing, we've done the descending. What about the cornering? And here are said corners. Yes, they're banked corners, they're surface corners, but the bottom line is they are fun corners. What we're going to be looking for here is weight distribution on the bike, grip, and also exit speed. Yes, believe it or not, the wheels did leave the ground there. Now, the thing with the shorter front center is that there's going to be more weight on the front wheel, but ultimately it's up to rider technique. Gotta say, that felt nice through there. Yes, that's the second time today that the wheels have left the deck. Now, already you feel that the longer bike is more stable, but this is where it counts, these corners. Wow, that was a fun all day. That was a fun day for sure. And the bottom line, I think it's pretty emphatic. Big days, long rides, hard terrain, 100% the XL. But for days such as here in the Forest of Dean, a lot of bike park style riding, tighter corners, more manufactured corners, for sure it's the L, and possibly the L with the smaller capacity 500 watt-hour battery. Do your runs in the morning, have a sausage and bacon roll, cup of coffee, change the battery, come out in the afternoon and hit another 10 laps. I hope that was help. It's been immense fun riding these two bikes. Remember that the Nukeproof bikes, in the bigger scheme of things, aren't actually small bikes. They're probably on the larger size. But any questions, folks, more than happy to help you if you've got any questions when it comes to choosing a Nukeproof Mega, or indeed any other e-mounted bike on the market. So give them on the comments, and hopefully see you on the hill.